It is Thursday, May 22nd, and you're listening to Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined today by Drew Mentok and Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated. And guys, going on or about to start during this podcast, the official announcement and of Pat Garrity as Notre Dame's first general manager of both men's and women's basketball. It's a position that did not exist in the past in any world of college sports, and now it is ubiquitous and absolutely necessary. And Tim Priester, you covered Pat Garrity. I was in school just before Pat Garrity, and there is not a better representative. Notre
No.
Dame's got a lot of them in the basketball team, but there's not a better representative of Pat Garrity for this role, and probably someone he'll be as qualified as any.
Yeah, totally agree. You couldn't pick a person better for this job, and you couldn't have. This was absolutely necessary and needed for these two programs, especially the men's program, which can't seem to get to the NCAA tournament other than like once every, what has it been, 8 years? One time in 8 years.
Yeah,
So yeah, absolutely great choice. Pat Garrity, top-notch Notre Dame man, background in the
player too.
NBA. Yeah, great player too, 2,000 point scorer at Notre Dame. Future soon to be Ring of Honor addition, we would imagine, because well, I've been told that
Yeah,
him and John Paxson are, I don't know if I've been definitively told that those are the next two, but I think there's a good chance of that. And Garrity deserves it even more because he's a 2,000 point scorer, but great choice. And they need it. Women's basketball needs it too with the upheaval that took place upon the conclusion of this past season.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely the best person you could envision for this role. I do, as somebody who lived in Detroit over, the last, previous 4 years before I started with Irish Illustrated. Detroit basketball wasn't in a good place for a long time, and he did oversee a lot of that. So I know where, as you mentioned, the press conference is going on now, but there are some questionable decisions that I'd be curious how much his role was involved with when it comes to that. Like Monty Williams is being paid $65 million to coach his high school son by the his son's team in high school by the Pistons right now. So I would be curious how much he's involved with that. I think from just looking into it, he was a lot more like cap stuff and you know how that works, which navigating the NBA cap should make it, revenue sharing and NIL kind of a piece of cake because that is a way more complicated of a job. But I would be curious some of those things because yeah, that was definitely the worst sporting team in Detroit while I was there until this past year. And they definitely turned it around. They became the first team to triple its win total from the
Yeah,
season
I was
before
going to
this year.
say,
So
no,
they did turn it around, but he was there in the assistant GM role for 7 or 8 seasons without winning at least 42 games. So they were like right around 500 or 20 to 17 to 20 wins for some of those teams too.
I think
So
we all thought that it was unfair for Monty Williams to be the the guy that got cut out of the equation, and yet to be the only team
hmm
to triple your win total the next year and make the playoffs and fight pretty valiantly, um, against the Knicks in the playoffs. Yeah, whatever. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. He wasn't the lead man, but
mhm.
as it relates to Notre Dame and somebody, just giving a path, a direction to the way you go about recruiting, for the men's, it just seems so scattershot, with regard to the transfer portal in particular.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, I keep saying these jobs didn't exist, but this has existed elsewhere for a couple of years. But I do wonder what the charge is from Bavacqua. In other words, like what Mike Martin's is. It's you have to get us a national championship roster. This is the amount of money we're going to use to do it, and it may increase if you think we need it to get a national championship roster. That cannot be the same charge Pat Garrity is getting for Notre Dame men's basketball. It's not logical. It's not reasonable. It's not good business. So in some ways, this is a harder job because his hands will
Well,
be tied more than Mike Martin's in terms of building a roster. He can't build the roster exactly how he wants to build a roster.
no, I don't think, I mean, national title talk is silly. How
That's what
about
I'm saying. Like
yeah,
it's
well, but,
what's the goal? Hey, get to a
well, the
tournament every
goal,
2 years. Like
well,
I mean,
to get to it on a consistent
yeah,
basis.
that's
And that's
probably it.
that.
Yeah. So one coach has done that in the last 30 years, and he stopped doing it too.
Mhm.
That's a tough situation. I remember walking out of, I don't want to get this year wrong, 2017 we left a Notre Dame men's basketball game. They were probably not going to make the tournament, but could have, as we now know they're the last team out. And you said they have to make the tournament this year. It was the Colson Farrell year
because you knew what was coming up.
because you knew what was coming up.
Yeah.
They didn't make it. It was an ignominious end, and boy, did it go badly after that. So yeah, that's the first question I would want of Pat Garrity, probably off the record, is what do you have? What do you have? I mean, because he'll be given more leeway to help the women's team than the men's team. The women should want to compete for a national title, or realistically can. They were the number
Yeah,
one team in the nation before they floundered at the end of the season. I find it intriguing, like what your role is as the men's versus the women's general manager.
I agree. I think there'll be some degree too, especially with, if revenue sharing comes in and things can get a little more stable. I think that will be something he's really charged with, is getting guys who can come in and stay and develop in the program, and kind of prioritizing that. I mean, we even look at, the end of Bray's term, some of his best recruits left after a season too, or so I think getting guys who are going to stay and develop, which Shrewsbury has, done to a degree with keeping Marcus Burton around, but yeah, just really cementing stability and a program that can build rather than something that's trying to chase the transfer portal like a lot of other teams do in college basketball.
Notre Dame always was starting its 2026 college football season at Lambeau Field with Wisconsin, but it still feels a little different now that it's the showcase game on Sunday night. Sunday night in Lambeau Field. I shouldn't say Sunday night, but Sunday at Lambeau Field, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. It's be a tough ticket, Tim Priester.
It will be Sunday night.
You have an in. It will be Sunday night, of course,
Yeah.
yes, but you have it. It'd be kind of cool to see that sparkling daylight. But September 6th, you want night game in Lambeau Field, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, isn't I'm for me, I mean, Lambeau Field's kind of a bucket list kind of
Well, we lost it.
destination.
We
Yeah,
lost it in
exactly.
2020. Yeah.
Yeah, lost in 2020, and so now you're going to do it 6 years later, and I still think it'll be cool. I don't the stadium that comes to mind for me, and I know it's completely different, but when you're outside, Notre Dame played football games in Fenway Park. I thought that the surrounding area, the outside of Fenway Park, just drips with baseball tradition, and I expect Lambeau Field to kind of have a similar feel to it as with regard to football stadiums. I can't wait. I mean, I think that'll be the knock on wood. That'll be my 45th year covering Notre Dame football, and it will be awesome to attend a game in Lambeau Field.
Yeah, something that jumps out about to me is that opening the season too is that I think we're just going to be heading into an off season full of Luke Fickell versus Marcus Freeman questions. I'm already my immediately jump to like the overplayed storyline heading into that game, knowing it's first, knowing he's going to start getting those probably in the spring, and I mean for good reason. It seems like there's potentially some I mean bad blood's probably a strong word, but they aren't as simpatico certainly as they were before he left Cincinnati, and yeah, that's kind of what stood out to me. In addition, I mean, obviously that's a historic venue, and will be a unique opportunity to open there. But yeah, a lot of Luke Fickell talk versus Marcus Freeman, assuming those are both still the coaches coming up for that.
Instead of talking about this in segment 2, there was a question from Statman72 that's 6 straight road openers. What is the logic behind that? And it's not only 6 straight road openers, it's all high profile. So I think we have the logic here. But at Florida State and Tallahassee, at Ohio State, Marcus Freeman's first game, that was remarkable coincidence there. Going out to Dublin, of course, to play Navy, not a profile game, but everybody in the nation watched that one. Then A&M was the most talked about opener I can remember for Notre Dame. I mean, I guess Ohio State and A&M are both there. We have Miami coming up, and now Lambeau Field. I mean, Tim Priester, other than prestige and getting all eyeballs on Notre Dame, is there an advantage? It's not an
For Notre
advantage on
Dame
that road. Yeah, the opening year on the road.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think Notre Dame fans will kind of are looking at will look at this similarly. That man, that would be an awesome place to go see Notre Dame play. Certainly it's still the home state of Wisconsin, so there's going to be a ton of Wisconsin fans as well. It's an NBC game because it's a Shamrock Series game.
Right.
No, I wish it was. I'd rather start this season in Lambeau Field against Wisconsin than at Miami.
Well, at Miami should just be played in November. We can all agree on that one. There's no reason to play the game that early in Miami. I don't need to get away yet, Tim. I'm just selfishly speaking. I don't need to go to Miami on Labor Day weekend. 1 week from today, it might be our next podcast, actually, with the Memorial Day Monday break coming up. But we will speak with Irish head coach Marcus Freeman, not just us, but the rest of the Notre Dame beat. And I think that's there's mostly on the record, but there's off the record stuff. The on the record stuff, it's I hope to have cleared up there, and I know we can go in many different directions with this, but I just want to know the ins and outs of how they're handling the roster uncertainty this offseason, because I find that fascinating. They're pretty forthright with everybody. They are in their end of season meetings, which happen in late January this time, and also end of spring meetings. But I want to know about the challenge this year, Priester, of what they had to go through trying to figure out if we're down to 105, who has to leave, how do we support trying to find a home for them or keep them at Notre Dame, and all the things that went with that.
Well, with Notre Dame grandfathering in players, the drama obviously is a lot less. But I know that you've been on top of that, and yeah, I want to make sure that you have your questions ready, for next Thursday, because I think that I don't know how forthcoming he will be because he doesn't have to be. Maybe when we get into the off the record stuff, but then that's truly off the record and not
Yeah.
something that we're supposed to be discussing. I
That won't
think
help the
so.
podcast. Yeah.
No, I think over the course of months, there may be information that came from that comes out that isn't attributed to that day, what have you. But yeah, I thought last year was wildly entertaining. The opportunity that we had to interview him both on the record and off the record. It was Notre Dame's idea to do the off the record stuff, which I thought, again, was generous of them to do. I don't know, did anybody violate the integrity of the process that
No.
we're aware of? So I
No.
don't think that, well, if someone had.
But what's your on the record question that you would like something? What's your topic?
I
'Cause
really
usually you're
haven't.
looking at some on the field stuff, but there's been so much off the field stuff.
Yeah, I got to admit, Tim, life is a little bit complicated right now, so I'm
Sure
not
is.
sure that I've given a whole lot of
Yeah,
thought to a week from today. Um, Let me give that a little bit more thought. I'll tell you what, I'll surprise you next Thursday when we're
that's
when
good.
we're in the press conference.
The point is, though, we will have a instant analysis on that, so we can catch people up. Look for that around 2 o'clock next Thursday, and look for that around 2 o'clock from every site next Thursday, because I think there is a nice agreement to do it at the exact same time. Tim Priester, before we go to segment two, you talked about what Notre Dame needed to perhaps secure or be heavily considered for a tournament berth. You mentioned Boston College was a winnable game. It became a bad baseball loss, and I think that changes the dynamic of this conversation in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah, again, I pointed out that they were a lot of people thought, oh, okay, they finished strong, and so they're already in, regardless what happens in the ACC tournament. Well, as I pointed out, they were 11th place team, and they were 6-12 against the teams that were ahead of them. So I thought it was necessary to win. You're like, hey, maybe on Monday, on Memorial Day, they're announcing the 64 team field. Maybe we'll, because I saw one listing as the last four in going into the ACC tournament. Maybe that doesn't hurt them, but it probably should, because they lost 3 out of 4 to Boston College, the number 14 seed. They didn't play their best baseball when they needed to. There was a base running error late in the game. There was a 166 hitter at the plate with the game on the line. It just, but I still don't think, look, regardless of whether they make the NCAA tournament or not, if they make it, they're not probably not going to go very far. I mentioned their two top pitchers, Riddell and Fox, and so that could help them. But I don't think it should diminish what happened at the end of the season. Sean Stifler kept the attention of his team, and they remained in contention. They beat Louisville 2 out of 3 at home. Then they went to Miami and won 2 out of 3. They swept some series down the stretch. And when you look at this team going into next year, there's a bunch of young players. They need to improve their infield defense dramatically, I think. They need to find a shortstop. It would be great if Estevan Moreno came back for his senior year, but he's draftable, certainly. Bunch of power, bunch of strikeouts. But the foundation of their team is still very young. Most of their production came from some young players. So I just don't, considering how bad things were early on and then recovering down the stretch. I don't want the Boston College loss to overshadow the accomplishment the last 5 weeks of the season.
I thought that this is one of those situations like the men's basketball team of 2020 that they deserve to play some more games because they were improving, even though Notre Dame was going to be NIT. They were going to be an NIT team that
Yeah.
was going to be able to win some games. But when you say they're probably not going to be able to, do any damage to the NCAA tournament, it's still one of those. It still feels like one of those stories that be like, oh, it would be nice to continue it and have it end.
Oh, no doubt. I'd
Yeah,
love to see
yeah.
it. Yeah.
No, I'm saying that it's one of those teams that sometimes you're limping out of the season. You're like, oh, they don't
Yeah.
deserve to be into that NCAA tournament. But when you're playing as well as they did after being left for dead by everyone, it's a different feeling.
Yeah. I mean, you walk out of the Durham Bulls stadium there the other night with all kind of regrets
Yeah.
because of the way you finished the regular season, and you had a chance to even the score with Boston College and didn't do it. I had some people say to me, well, why didn't they start Riddell? I mean, these guys are used to pitching every 7 days, not every 3 or 4 days. And Rory Fox's arm bounced back sooner than Riddell's apparently. And so Riddell was ready for Virginia in game 2. They only gave up 4 runs. You got to score more than 4 runs against Boston College in the ACC tournament.
Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. We'll be back with segment 2, Burning Up the Boards.
Burning up the boards is segment 2. We start with a question from King C Lover 19. Confidence rank the following. Number 1, CJ Carr starts at Miami. Number 2, Notre Dame wins at least one playoff game. Number 3, Jeremiah Love wins the Heisman. And number 4, Notre Dame fans don't miss L. Golden.
So I had for CJ Carr starts at Miami 68%, at least one playoff game 25%. Love wins the Heisman 1%, and the last one that fans don't miss Golden 10%, and it honestly might need to be lower than that.
Yeah, my confidence level ranking them Carr 1 easily. Notre Dame wins a playoff game 2 because fans don't miss Golden is impossible because something will go wrong and fans will be mad about Al Golden not being there to fix it. So that's 3. And Jeremiah Love winning the Heisman would be outstanding, but I don't think that's going to happen with Jadarian Price on his team. And the usage of Jeremiah Love will not lead to that.
That's the way I have it. I mean, winning the Heisman. I saw a list yesterday. My wife and I were in a restaurant. There was a list of, I want to say 20 guys, and Jeremiah Love wasn't on it.
So like 18 quarterbacks and
I
is
mean,
that how they do it now?
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that. I understand that. But 20, I mean, that's silly.
He should be, yes, he should be on a list of
Yeah,
10
he
people
should be.
probably.
So,
'cause
but winning the
preseason.
Heisman is, especially right as you say, a non-quarterback. That's the least likely. I think CJ Carr is going to start against Miami, so the most likely. And Notre Dame wins a playoff game. I expect them to make the playoffs, and so therefore I expect them to win a playoff game. And fans don't miss L. Golden. There's always going to be complaints about the offensive coordinator when he follows somebody
Defensive coordinator, yeah.
Yes,
a defensive coordinator. Well, really, either coordinator.
Either coordinator.
Yeah.
No. My long-standing theory is offensive coordinator gets more complaints because everyone thinks they can call offensive plays and not many people think they can call a defense
Yeah.
other than don't double safety blitz and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just think they're going to be mistakes that even if Golden would have made them, he just had such a great reputation. He won the Broyles Award. Like people are going to find mistakes or things that upset them, and it's always tough to follow somebody who left on a legendary note. So I think that's going to be against him. And with Love too, I just want to add like he's just not going to get the carries. Only
No.
3 running backs have won it since the start of the 2000s, and those were Mark Ingram, Reggie Bush, and Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram got a ton of carries, and Reggie Bush averaged 8.9 yards per carry that season. So Love would need to jump out, or at least through the first 12 games. So Love would need to jump up like 1.8 yards per carry, which, I mean, he's incredible. He could do something like that, but that's what it would have to happen. And he'd still need to get about 60 or 70 more touches through 12 games than he had last year. So he'd have to increase his efficiency and amount of times he touched the ball to
Yeah.
get to a Reggie Bush level.
He'd have to get either a bunch of receptions or a high percentage of his receptions going for touchdowns. I get it. I mean, I
Oh, that's
do.
a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do get why a running back is not listed by whatever I saw last night. But still, that's just the spectacular nature of Jeremiah Love. You'd think that he'd be on a list that lengthy.
very quickly, this was in Monday Musings, but do you guys know the last consensus All-American for Notre Dame at running back? So not even unanimous, but consensus. First team. Vegas Ferguson.
Well, I thought Alan Pinkett, but they weren't good enough for that to
He
happen.
was not.
So
He
even though
didn't even his only All-American mention was one of the things that
yeah,
doesn't even get counted. Yeah,
yeah,
it's Kyron Williams wasn't first team. Audric Esme wasn't first team. Jeremiah Love wasn't first team. It's just it's a
yeah.
tough road to hoe to get the
Yeah,
national
Vegas
honors there.
Ferguson carried 300 times in the season.
That's why he was consensus on it, and
I think
effectively
it
for a
was
good team.
was it not 301? I think it was
Yeah, it was
301
301.
carries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good
Next
Lord.
question. ND Quebec. Is Noah Grubb's spring game a cause for concern? You guys can add a little context to the question.
Go ahead, Drew.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, as Eric Thomas, our recruiting reporter, will have a piece coming out soon that kind of discusses like how much Noah Grubb's high school team lost. And then they're also playing, like, you know, prep
Yep.
school or school that's going to recruit. So the talent difference was significant. So there's not much he could do. So I think from the spring game specifically, I don't know if you should draw too much, but I think it's fair to be a little concerned about quarterback recruiting for Notre Dame a little bit at this point, which includes Grubbs. I mean, they haven't really offered somebody for 2027 last I checked still. Grubbs, they lost out on Deuce Knight, and then they brought in, somebody who will kind of see how Blake Hibbert works out. And then if Grubbs doesn't work out, like CJ Carr, if he works out, gets the starting job, Minchie will transfer, and then Carr could go off to the NFL after his junior year if he really hits. Now we'll see. But like they need guys coming up after that. And right now it's not there's no clear CJ Carr or somebody like that. You're like, okay, we know who the future after this year's starter will be yet.
It was a bad performance, but it was a bad performance by the entire Lake Mary football team, especially its offensive line. He was under tremendous duress the whole time. The program that Drew that you're referencing is called the First Academy, which is kind of along the lines of an IMG setting, and they overwhelmed Lake Mary. So he was under duress the whole time, threw a lot of bad passes. Is Noah Grubb I mean, is he a quarterback that can take Notre Dame to the national title? As I look at it right now, regardless of the scrimmage, I didn't necessarily think that he was that kind of player. So, is it cause for concern? Yeah, but I think it's a greater cause for concern for Lake Mary, and more of a reflection of the competition that they were playing against. Because Joe Burrow would have had difficulty throwing 60 touchdown passes in the season, Tim, if he had played with that surrounding cast against that opponent.
60. Always remember that, everybody listening. It's the magic number here at Irish Illustrated. From Andy Davis, which position coach has the toughest challenge ahead of him this season? Man, last year it was the easiest answer of all time in May with Joe Rudolph, and he answered the challenge.
Yeah, he did.
A little tougher now.
I don't know that any of them is a terrible. I don't think any of these situations are as bad as what Joe Rudolph
No,
appeared to be facing.
no.
But I mean, tight ends aren't very deep. Mike Denbrock, offensive coordinator, that coaches the tight ends. That'd be the first position I would say.
Said Gino Guidugli just because of that. I mean, obviously that's a position that's a lot of scrutiny. He's going in with a first time starter to kind of go through, the two toughest games of the season to start off. Steven Jelly was a fan favorite. Like if either of those guys, whoever starts doesn't seem ready for the moment, there's going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders, at least from the fan base, because they're going to see, well, you kicked out a guy who we saw who could step up in the moment too. So I think just from external pressure, if things don't go swimmingly, and again, he is preparing two younger players to start after having, a veteran in Riley Leonard last year. So I think his challenge and the pressure is going to be higher when you kind of combine those two factors.
I think quarterback's a great point, Drew. I'm going with wide receiver because not as big of a challenge as last year, I don't think. But when your offensive coordinator says at no point did we trust our wide receivers the entire football season last year, I don't think it all flips the script immediately in the offseason when you don't have your starting quarterback ready. You're missing your number one or A or 1B wide receiver in Malachi Fields. And the guy you really wanted to take a step forward, Micah Gilbert, missed all of the spring as well. So I think it's tough at wide receiver, nowhere near as hard as last year or the year before or the year before.
We just mentioned three different spots on offense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Max Bulla or Mike Mickens has a terribly difficult job in terms of getting his personnel out there.
Yeah,
Al Washington,
well, his biggest job is a rotation that
a proper
serves.
rotation and defining roles. And, Al has, and unlike those two, Xavier Watson, Jack Kaiser are missing, but I think Washington had an easier job last year finding rotation behind Cross and Mills. It just didn't work out that way for him.
Yeah, I think there's more proven players on all the defensive positions, whereas those three we listed on offense, like we have maybe some faith that you have guys who can step up at all three, but we still need to see it. And if those guys don't, then that's, going to fall on those position coaches first and foremost. So
Jawan Sider, not the hardest job in the history of college football this year, right? Jawan Sider.
Definitely not.
Holy, yeah, but you know what? He didn't exactly go running away because he wouldn't have had a hard job at Penn State either. That's he can start recruiting during games, right? That's the way it works at that position. You're on autopilot at that point. Sorry, maybe not quite that much.
Question from Sunny B 24/7s. Which Notre Dame teams have you been the most surprised about, good or bad, after your preseason predictions?
Bad. Let's go with this century. I didn't think 2003 would be that bad. I thought they'd be absolutely fine after the defense of 2002. Instead, they were horrible, so that would be bad. 2011, I wrote about this recently. I believed way too much player and coaching conversation about how good they were going to be. When you have that quarterback situation, the offensive line was only average too at that time. I was wrong about 11. 16, I had concerns. Nobody had 4-8 concerns, but I had 8-4, 9-3. I had 8-4 concerns in 16.
Yeah.
But 4-8 is just silly. I mean, I didn't have those type of concerns. So those would be the three wrong. I would go 2003, 2011, and then in a different way, 2016. He was just they're a winning program at that point, so I just didn't see that happening. Recently, I don't. I guess I thought they'd be a game or so better in 2022, but other than that, no, I'm sorry. 2023, I thought they would be, especially after the season started, if that's fair. I thought they would be a better team than they ended up than 2023.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't covering the team in 2016, but just, living in South Bend, they had a second round pick at quarterback. You don't usually expect those teams to go 4-8, whatever your expectation was. There were two future top 10 picks at offensive line. I know the defense was maybe the bigger struggle, but usually you don't see a team with some of those talented pieces doing that badly. And the I guess the buzz certainly around town didn't match that. I think 2020, I know Tim, pretty sure you talk about that a lot, but to go from a season we weren't sure was going to happen is going to have all these crazy protocols for them to end up in the, go undefeated, beat Clemson at home, which I know you guys mentioned you predicted, but I still think that for how that worked out, given everything Notre Dame had to endure, I think is still kind of a surprise and something, I know people don't love Brian Kelly, but he deserves a lot of kudos for still.
When you win 10 games one year, I mean, almost regardless of how much talent you lose, you don't expect 4-8, 3-9, that kind of stuff. So, I've told the story about getting together with Charlie Weiss after his first two seasons and actually going to his house and just casually talking about stuff. And people had said, well, 2007 is going to be difficult. And he said, what are we going to do? Win 4 games? Well, they won 3. So,
That's on your list, right?
yeah, yeah, that's definitely on my list.
Pleasant surprise is a tougher one because we tend to bump up Notre Dame a game or so in rankings, and then Priester, you and I have talked about how we have felt the need over the years to drop them a game or so because you get too close to a team's ceiling and don't recognize what just might be the reality under there. The most pleasant surprise, I mean, Weiss's was the biggest surprise. That was an absolute revelation of football in 2005. That was amazing. That would be the best a team has done that I did not think would approach that at all at Notre Dame preseason. I had no idea they would be
Well,
that
and
exciting and that
and
good.
the passing game was so prolific.
Yeah,
And Brady Quinn in his last 2 seasons just blew away every passing record, and nobody's close.
I mean, Samardzija just became a national headline. Think about that. He was the third receiver going into that game with Rima McKnight and Stovall, and he became a national headliner for the rest of the season. That's got to be the best pleasant surprise I think we've had
Mhm.
covering Notre Dame or following Notre Dame. I like this question, and I'm going to add to it as well. From DFW Irish, who are your top 5 players in college football this century? So between 2000 and 2024.
So for me, there's going to be some recency bias. I don't remember, especially like the early 2000s as well, as I'm sure you guys do. But I had Quentin Nelson, Brady Quinn, Xavier Watts, Joe Alt, and Manti Te'o.
Oh, you did Notre Dame only. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Oops, I
That's the next
jumped
part.
ahead.
So
Yeah,
let's start with Notre Dame. That was
I
my addendum to the
apologize.
question.
Okay.
Give me your Notre Dame 5 again.
Quentin Nelson, Brady Quinn, Xavier Watts, Joe Alt, and Manti Te'o.
I can't argue that. Okay. It's very difficult for me to limit it to 5. So, I mean, the guys that you said, Drew, I have them down. I also have Golden Tate. I also have Michael Mayer.
I had Tate as
Yeah,
well.
I would add those two to the list. It's very difficult for me to limit this to 5. Other names I wrote down, but I wouldn't put in the top 5. Jalen Smith, Usu Koromoa, Julian Love was passes defense that had an outrageous number. Kyle Hamilton. I know he didn't
Right.
necessarily put up the numbers, but we knew he was a 5-star player when he came in, and he ended up being a first-round draft choice as well.
Yeah, he's
So
one who might, in terms of his pro career, might be the best player from Notre
Yeah.
Dame, other than like a Zach Martin. Like he might have that type of career. So
it's kind of like including Montana in like a Mount Rushmore at Notre Dame. I mean, you don't if it's Notre Dame, but if it's a Mount Rushmore of Notre Dame products, then Montana's on it. That it's. I think Kyle Hamilton is clearly a better professional safety than Xavier Watts will be. Not to denigrate Xavier Watts in any way. Xavier Watts had a better college career. The only reason I didn't include Tate, I would have the same 5 as Drew. That was a great 5. Tate had the best single season statistically in Notre Dame football history in 2009 because 10 of their 12 games came down to the last 2 possessions, which means all of his stats, except for, I've gone through this before, except for 15 yards, were accrued in high leverage situations, which is insane. Um, but he had 1 year, and Brady Quinn's 2 years were just for a good team, a contending team. Xavier Watts brought him to the playoffs. Quentin Nelson was just maybe the best single season and player you could have out there at any position. Quentin Nelson was unbelievable. Highway robbery when he didn't win the Outland Trophy. Come on, man. That's just silly. So the only reason Tate didn't make it for me is my bias goes to he was playing games that mattered, but boy was Xavier Watts playing games that mattered more. Golden Tate was playing situations that mattered to that day. Xavier Watts was playing nationally relevant situations, so I would keep Xavier Watts on my list. How about the question was actually though, top 5 college football players.
Okay, I'll
You
let's
start
throw
there.
out one at a time.
Okay.
I'll start with Joe Burrow because
60.
that's just stupid.
yeah, he's number one for me as well. So
I'll
I
go
agree.
Reggie
He was
Bush. We'll go Reggie Bush if it's my turn to say one.
Yep. All
yeah,
right,
Reggie
Drew.
Bush would be 2 for me. I'm gonna go Lamar Jackson.
I have Lamar Jackson on my list. And Ndamukong Suh
Yeah, he's
was incredible.
My head's about to explode if we don't say his name. I don't like the guy, but he is definitely number one on the
Is
list.
it Tim Tebow? Is
Tim
that
Tebow is the Tim Priester. I want to say this
What
out
do you
loud. This is better than
what did Tim Tebow do wrong? You say you don't like the guy. Is that what you're saying?
No, Tim Tebow is not my favorite football player. I'm not arguing
Oh,
for this favoriteness. Tim Tebow is the all-time
yeah.
leading rushing touchdowns leader in the SEC. Do you know who played in the SEC at running back?
There's some pretty good guys
All
there.
right.
yeah.
And he won a national title, and he had hands in another national title.
Yeah.
Why don't I
No.
like Tebow? Because he's sanctimonious and annoying. That's why I don't like Tebow. But that has nothing to do with it. Like we can't like everybody. You like every good player?
No, I mean,
Right, I don't like him.
I have no,
My point
I
is,
wouldn't,
it doesn't matter if I like him. His numbers are insane with a national title. He was eighth on this list that came out.
Yeah, he's
uh,
referenced Bruce Feldman for the Athletic did a list of the top
yeah,
25
I
players of
actually did
the
not see the list.
yeah. Uh
Yeah.
I agree. He had Vince Young seventh, who's somebody I would want to consider. Just
Vince Young. Yeah.
his championship game performance is like maybe the most unforgettable performance of my like adolescence. Like that was incredible. Just that alone. I think he finished third in the Heisman, maybe second, but he either way, like that was incredible.
I think
Um,
what Cam Newton did for Auburn.
yes, Cam was number one on the list, Tim, of the
Oh, he
actual list.
was?
Yeah, he
Okay.
was number one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And the point kind of being argued on our message board in favor of Cam, which is a good point. I just don't always go with this argument. His supporting cast was nowhere near as good as Tim
Yeah.
Tebow's, Joe Burrow's, Reggie Bush.
Drew, I love that. I mean, Lamar Jackson was unbelievable. He was tremendous. His numbers were what, like the second most total offense to I'm not remembering now. It was
Plus,
a quarterback.
the first time you saw Lamar Jackson, you looked out there, you're like, what's that? When he's running down the field against Florida. Remember, it was the Florida State game, and he made everyone in Florida State look like they had never played football before. He was
Yeah.
so fast. So he might be the one that's just like the unique. He's a unicorn out there running around. He
Yeah.
was like a taller Michael Vick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
would
that's the thing. He's so fast that people assume he's shorter than he is because
Yeah.
he's not a little person either. But everyone just like, oh, he's like 5'11". It's like, no, he's 6'3" or 6'4". Like he's
I,
not little.
Devontae Smith, the receiver from
He's on the list.
Alabama,
Yeah,
was
he's on the list.
spectacular. Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State has, if he's not on that list, he has a chance to be on that list before he's done at Ohio State.
So very quickly, because this was we'll move on after this one. This was pre-pod conversation. Manti was not on the list, and he is clearly Notre Dame's most accomplished player. Well, maybe of all time for 1 year, or well, not maybe. He is
Accomplished as in
accomplished.
awards. Yeah.
Awards, yeah. But Drew made a good point. Quentin Nelson could have been the best player in the United States in 2017, but he was a guard.
Yeah.
Quentin Nelson is probably the best single season Notre Dame player. It's just he was a guard for a 3-loss team.
He has highlight plays that people still reference, like for his like draft prep that are like from playing guard. Like he is. Some people say he is the best like single clip that play against Georgia. Like I don't know. It's hard to produce highlight tape as an offensive guard, and he somehow did it. And he was the only offensive lineman on that list as well too, and he did it at left guard, which I think says a lot. And one other note is there are 4 safeties on the list, which I was kind of surprised by. And neither Notre Dame, that might be one of the positions they produced the best at, but they didn't get anybody there. But it's interesting, 4 safeties and no linebackers is kind of surprising.
Xavier Watts wasn't on the list. How deep was the list?
25.
25. 25, yeah. So
Okay.
that's a tough one.
Question from Martin Evenflow. Which defensive coordinator did you have more confidence in going into their first seasons at Notre Dame? Mike Elko, Clark Lee, Marcus Freeman, Al Golden, or Chris Ash?
This is tough because Elko had the hardest job by far of this group. I mean, by far. Taking over the worst defense and one of the 2 worst defenses in modern Notre Dame history. So I had a lot of confidence in Elko, though. Would do the job, and we knew they had good players. The lowest confidence, I didn't know as much about Freeman out of all. Well, maybe Ash. I just don't think Ash has his job is as hard as the others. So I would not rate lowest confidence in Ash. I guess Elko, because things could have just gone incredibly poorly. Right? You didn't know those guys were going to be as good as they were.
Yeah, I had Freeman at top just 'cause- I mean he was like the defensive coordinator free agent that summer.
Hmm.
They I mean he almost went to LSU and then Notre Dame like upped their offer and was able to get him here. So I think just from like reputation, whereas I mean Elko came from Wake Forest, Lee was the linebackers coach. I know you guys were covering the team, so you guys probably were more familiar with him than I was at the
Yeah,
time.
from inside, Lee was pretty safe, Drew. Yeah, but I know what you're
Okay.
saying from, yeah.
I mean, Al Golden was always interesting just because of it, how his career kind of fell. And then he was, I know helped call plays with the Bengals, his last year when they made it to the Super Bowl. But I wasn't curious optimistic on him as what his career turned out to be. But I would say Lee, just from my perspective, somebody who wasn't covering the team was the one I was like, this is interesting.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, we were all impressed with Clark Lee, but defensive coordinator, it's like when people talk about Mike Mickens, well, he should be a defensive coordinator. Being a cornerbacks, defensive backs coach is extremely different. So I would say probably the two that I just on the surface least confidence would be Lee, and I would probably say Ash because it isn't something that he hasn't been a coordinator in recent years. Most confident I would say either Elko or Freeman, but I may be a little bit biased about Elko because I was the one that said that they
Yeah,
should
you
get
liked
Mike
Elko. Yeah.
Elko, and then they got him. And like Drew said, I mean, Freeman's the narrative around Freeman was Notre Dame was getting one of the best defensive coordinators in the country.
Freeman had Hamilton. He did not have JOK. Um, I mean, I think we had confidence in Freeman going in. You could argue Freeman had the worst, I guess Golden had the worst single season debut of the group.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
probably. I didn't look at it and say, okay, this is the talent he has. I mean, I was just looking at it from a coordinator standpoint. I knew Elko had done really great things at a place where it was difficult to do great things defensively.
I love the Golden hire, and I know it took him a year and a half. I mean, not a year and a half. I know it took him 1 year, but I absolutely love the Golden hire. He was
I
not the
did too.
best
I
first
just
year, but
didn't. Yeah, I didn't think that his defense would be that good, but I thought it was an excellent choice. The background as a head coach, just I mean, you talk to Golden. I was just always impressed with the man first and foremost.
Definitely. And Golden was helpful just for you had Marcus Freeman, first time head coach, having somebody who
yes.
had that experience at a place like Miami where you're going to get a lot of scrutiny and stuff. I mean, I know Freeman always, they both emphasize that Freeman makes the decision, but to have somebody like that to bounce things off of as well, I'm sure, maybe as we get further away, he'll be more willing to acknowledge how helpful that was.
You know who else I was pretty high on when he came in was John Tenuta, to be honest with you. I mean, I watched John Tenuta eviscerate Notre Dame and thought, oh, that can't hurt to have him on Notre Dame's side as opposed to his 897 blitzes that all hit home in 2007. Kind of stuck with me a little bit there, Priester. Couldn't believe. Turns out not everybody is susceptible to the blitz like Notre Dame 2007 was
No.
in the home opener. From Stillier Huckleberry, would you rather? And these are some good questions. Get a one-on-one with Freeman in which he answers all of your questions truthfully, and you can then use one for a story and keep the rest in your bank of knowledge. Or B, be in charge of Notre Dame's fourth quarter analytics strategic decisions in 2025. You would like to note your salaries do not change. C, fly on the team jet to the road games and postseason and be able to observe but never discuss what you hear. Or D, and this I think is targeted to Priester and I, find out what happened at Michigan 2019.
Go ahead, Drew.
I think I don't really want the pressure of B, so I will definitely put that dead last. I think A is definitely really enticing, but I think if I'm the only media member who gets that opportunity, just like the relationship building opportunities and like I think there are other advantages besides just being on the plane and
Yeah.
observing that would be really helpful for the job. I mean, I was also at the Michigan game. I'm also curious what happened there. That was that was very surprising. So if there is some conspiracy theory on that's true out there on what happened, then I mean I would be very curious to know that.
Well, I think we got a bit of an inkling as to the Michigan game in 2019, but I agree with Drew. I don't want any part of the fourth quarter analytic strategic decisions. I know there are many fans out there that are the experts as it happens, and they call the next play that they ran. I don't want any part of that. I'm not qualified for that at all, and so I don't want any part of that. I would choose A. Um, I would choose A. I think. As far as the Michigan, I mean, we heard about the players complained about the degree of difficulty of practices during the bye week, right, Tim? Wasn't there was a bye week before that?
Yeah, I think it's a tongue-in-cheek edition of D for our
I
podcast.
gotcha.
Yeah,
I gotcha. I mean that had some that doesn't fully explain though. They just did not answer the
right.
bell at all.
No
And as we've talked about, we knew when you and I saw each other coming in from the rain into the press box, it's like this just does not feel good, man.
You want to talk about an unholy land like we had in our podcast question last time? Holy cow, that place felt rough. 60 is the fun number for our podcast. 0 and 7 for Tim O'Malley in Ann Arbor when he's attended games as a student, fan, or journalist. So that's pretty fun. I would go with B for sure. Number one, I do want to be in charge of all those decisions. Number two is C. I love the background of finding out what they think about all these things, what their plans are, seeing if when do you then watch the game and find out is this wow, that's exactly what they said, or holy cow, they did not have any idea what was going to happen there. I always find that really interesting behind the scenes. And of course, the one story is not even as good as the Bank of Knowledge in A. The one story goes off the internet in a week. That Bank of Knowledge would last you as long as that coaching
It's
staff
a
is
good
together.
point. That's
Yeah.
a good point.
Yeah.
You
And
think
then
you're
D, I think I'd rather find out what happened against Michigan 2006. That was pretty awful too, to
yeah.
the
You think
points.
you're qualified to handle those decisions in
You
the
got
fourth
it.
quarter,
I'm ready.
J.O. Melly?
Sign me up. Don't know if I'm qualified, but I'm getting it done. I have a little confidence.
But you're a
Our
better
final
man than I am.
our
Me
final
too.
question. You know what? I'm gonna have a chart and just pretend if I'm wrong, I'm like, the chart said to do this. Every time the chart that goes wrong, I'm gonna point at the dumb chart and then I'm gonna act like that was supposed to happen that way. Plus I can count when I know I don't need to lead by 12, Brian Kelly.
You know what I would sign up for? The decision making in the Notre Dame Boston College baseball game the other
Yeah.
night. Before I'd sign up for
Yes.
that.
Every time I think of decision making, I just think of the worst ones. Like when you're watching the Notre Dame Northwestern game from 2014, I think to myself, someone in the world tell him this is wrong.
That's
I
what I
think
can't believe.
you
You
said
know,
that, right?
somebody,
How could you
yeah,
not?
well,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
somebody, you don't have a relationship with your coaching staff where a coach can't say, Coach, you don't want to do that. You
Also, your
don't
fifth
want to
grade
go
math
for two
teacher
points.
explained it to you once.
Yeah.
So, like, really, there was just anyway. That's mine. Not every decision is quite as easy. So maybe I would struggle with B more than I think, but I tend to use that one as my. Anyway, I like this final question because of the name. Inside Irish Sports Illustrated _ Daily Breakdown Athletic and Gold. Twitter. I'm feeling that's a parody account. What are your favorite Memorial Day traditions, memories, or B, Memorial Day sports memories? And I admit I included this because of Tim Priester's Memorial Day weekend past.
Oh yeah, I don't go anymore. My brother still does, and now he's taking family members and fiancés and not his fiancée, his wife and the whole family, the Indy 500. I went to the Indy 500, I want to say 33 straight times.
Yeah.
Starting out in the infield at a young age, some of which I remember, some of which I don't. But loved it. And we'll watch it again, but really I've been in enough stadiums, both the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and football stadiums, that I really don't need to go into a crowd of that size anymore.
For sports memories, I coached the St. Joe High School and South Bend freshman baseball team for a couple years, and 3 of those years, the varsity won sectionals. I believe that was always on Memorial Day, and one of those years they ended up winning state. So I think if I, going sport specific memories, I would go with that. And then also one year when I was like 24, me and some friends did like a 4 or 5 hour kayaking trip down the Kankakee River and then camped and like fished off the shore like once we
Oh, cool.
finished. And I think we were in like my friend's uncle's backyard. Like it wasn't intense camping. It was pretty comfortable, but
Let me,
as fondest memory.
if I could just insert about the St. Joe state title in baseball. Nice to win a state title without having to go through number one ranked 30-1 Andrean. That's all I'm saying.
That is true. The next 2 years they got dropped back down to 3A, and that's who we lost to in regional. So you are correct that that was a factor.
My sports memory from that, I'll because my family's from Boston, the Memorial Day massacre of Boston and the Lakers in Game One of the NBA Finals is something I'll always remember, and it's just the best name ever because, of course, the Memorial Day massacre was actually like in the 30s in reality, like 1936, 37. But Memorial Day massacre, Celtics over the Lakers, that's a big one, and then the Lakers won the title though after that one. That's bouncing back. I don't remember many scores like the late great Loose Emoji. But 148 to 114 sits right there in my head for some reason as an 11-year-old. So that would be the memory. And the new memory I am forging this weekend, I have forbidden all kids from participating in any additional tournaments because none are scheduled. And we are saying no to any invitations to do any sports so I can have one weekend off for the first time since July 28th, 2024, from work or going to a sporting event. That is my new memory, Tim Priester. It is going to be great. My memory from the Indianapolis 500 is going to my friend's lake house and always Sunday getting rained out and then having to watch it Monday because there's so much rain. To me, it seems like it's rained out every 3 years, but that's probably not the case. You would remember more since you were at those things, right?
Oh man, there was some bad weather mixed in there. No doubt about it.
That is it for this edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. We are off Memorial Day Monday. There could be Memorial Day Massacre. There's a basketball game on that day. Until then, actually, we'll be back. We are thinking next week, right? After the Marcus Freeman press
Yeah,
conference.
Thursday, next a week from today.
A week from today will be a little later in the afternoon because we do meet with
We
Coach.
have had we have had two podcasts a week for a long, long time.
Probably dating back to my same weekend off, July 28th range, I would
Yeah.
guess, right around there,
Yeah.
because the football season did not end this year, Tim Priester. It was in a good way. It would be bad if all those games were like consolation prizes you're going to cover, but they were actually pretty fun to cover. Until next Thursday, for Tim Priester and Drew Bentock, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for listening and watching Irish Illustrated Insider.